Throughout gaming history, there have been countless developers which the majority of video game enthusiasts would consider nothing short of legendary. Teams like id Software, Team Silent, Kojima Productions, and many more. There's one development team that, for its time, clearly did not reach its full potential. A team that would make a few of the most hardcore and beautifully created video games ever. That team was Clover. Clover Studio was an independent dev team formed inside of Capcom during the early 2000s. Throughout the studio's life, we'd see amazing action games from them, like Beautiful Joe 2, Okami, and the ultimate ball-busting challenge that was God Hand. With Clover's founding, the initial goal of the team was to give each member a place in the company to develop and collaborate on original IPs. This would be a breath of fresh air for seasoned devs like Shinji Mikami and Hideki Kamiya. No longer would these guys, and the rest of the team for that matter, be expected to continuously work on the series that they had helped to create. Now they were given a chance to shine with some brand new, grade A game ideas. The name Clover is actually a play on the English words creativity and lover, and the Japanese words mi and ba appear in the word mitsuba, which is Japanese for three-leaf clover. And funnily enough, mi and ba would come to represent Shinji Mikami and Atsushi Ina ba. So yeah, you can see that the staff were really into the idea of making new and creative things for Capcom. The three main titles created by Clover, Vijo 2, Okami, and God Hand, while really great action games that are all celebrated today, sadly underperformed at the time in comparison to Capcom's other series. After attempting to reform the team back into the company's R&D division, Clover was unfortunately disbanded. After their departure from Capcom, Hideki Kamiya and his fellow staff members, which, by the way, were most of Clover Studio, would once again start their own team, this time under Sega. This new dev team was created through a business merger between two companies, Seed Inc. and Odd Inc., and would go on to become Platinum Games. In 2008, this new company would finally reveal the 4 games that they had been working on. These games were Mad World, a Sin City-inspired gritty action game that started its life as a Wii cash grab for casual gamers, the type of game that the entire family could enjoy. Kamiya has gone on the record and said this, by the way. Infinite Space, a handheld space RPG for the DS. Vanquish, an extremely badass and stylish third-person shooter by Shinji Mikami that we will definitely be talking about at some point on this channel. And finally, my favorite title of the 4, Bayonetta. So after working on a few cash grab pitches, fellow employee and ex-Capcom dev Yusuke Hashimoto approached Kamiya about making another game like his trademark stylish action games of the past. After a long conversation with Hashimoto, Kamiya was inspired to start brainstorming ideas for a badass new action title. With most of the staff being well-versed in developing games like Beautiful Joe and DMC, it was a no-brainer to play to the team's strengths. The goal with this new game would be to create the ultimate third-person action game that would take the genre to a new level. Ideas for gameplay, character, and story came together very quickly. The name Bayonetta was chosen early on for the game's main character and for the project overall, and the idea that you'd be playing as an ancient witch revived in the modern day was the story's concept from day one. Out of the gate, Kamiya and his team had the clearest vision for what this title would be, making its development fairly easy. Starting with how the game would play, an idea the devs wanted to execute on was taking traditional weapons and using them in unique ways. The player's main weapon would be a set of pistols, the basic attack being a physical strike that leads to gunfire. According to Kamiya and lead motion designer Hidetoshi Kai, this idea was originally used when playing as Dante in Beautiful Joe. In that game, Dante would physically attack with his pistols, striking the enemy in a punching motion. The idea was expanded for Bayonetta, having the character use guns strapped to her feet as well as holding 2 guns in her hands. This quadruple gun system was difficult to get working at first, but the devs found that applying design techniques from DMC1 helped them figure out how to get this extraordinary fighting style working properly. This very pointed way of attacking and firing also helped in creating the name for our main character, Bayonetta, being a figurative feminine bayonet in combat. They literally stuck an A at the end of bayonet to make it feminine. It's super cheesy, but also very charming. With gameplay design out of the way, it was time to create the look of Platinum's leading lady. Believing that male characters were a little overdone in video games, Kamiya and Hashimoto thought that this would be the perfect time to introduce an iconic female character to the gaming world. They wanted a character that was not only sexy, but extremely powerful, someone who would emanate style wherever she went. To achieve this goal, Kamiya believed that a feminine perspective was important to getting this vision right. Freelance artist and lead character designer Mari Shimazaki was responsible for creating the look of Bayonetta, as well as every other main character in the game. After going over hundreds of Shimazaki's drawings, director Kamiya finally settled on a few key visual traits that would represent this Wicked Witch's personality. The colors black and red, and the idea that her outfit being made of her own magical hair were two things that kept coming up with most of Bayo's early concepts. As a final touch, Kamiya thought to add one visual feature that would not only separate Bayonetta from other iconic video game characters, but perfect her design overall. That final touch was her glasses. What started as a half-hearted joke became an almost obsession. Wanting to see what Bayonetta looked like with glasses on, Kamiya was surprised at how well the spectacles fit this stylishly imposing woman. With her final fashionable design in place, Kamiya and his team were ready to present Bayonetta to the higher-ups at Sega. It turns out that the people in charge did not like the glasses at all. Kamiya had one thing to say about this. And so started the legendary Glasses War of Platinum Games. After seeing Bayo's final designs, the bastards with the money wouldn't let up on how much they disliked the design. This led most of the staff creating their own reasons why Bayonetta had to wear glasses, even getting narrative staff to write lore on why she had to wear them. It took a lot of convincing, but eventually Kamiya would get the Sega overlords to accept Bayo for who she was, crediting his own non-stop stubbornness for why the glasses ended up getting the okay. You hear that, kids? Never give up on your dreams. By the way, as a silent middle finger from the dev team, every main character would get a pair of glasses in some form in the final game. I love that so much. We've covered a ton of dev history so far, and it's all really interesting, but we'll get back to it a bit later. For now, let's see how Bayonetta compares to and innovates on the action game genre. Let's talk about that wicked gameplay. As you can imagine, this being a Kamiya-directed game, Bayonetta does play similarly to Devil May Cry. The basic gameplay formula is fairly straightforward for an action game from this time period. You run around linear levels, doing some very light platforming, fighting angel enemies of varying difficulties, collecting their halos as currency to buy items or new skills, and you can find some genuinely challenging secret missions hidden around each of the levels. Bayonetta attacks with 3 different buttons, one for punching, another for kicking. And she has a dedicated gun button. Like Dante, Bayonetta has delayed and lock-on directional-based attacks, but she also has a few of her own tricks that set her apart from the rest of the action game legends. Bayonetta's move list is insane. The amount of combos you can perform between the 2 melee attack buttons is pretty impressive. Where Bayo differs from the rest of the crowd is with her unique wicked weave attacks and dodges. Executing certain dial-in combos will result in an extremely powerful final hit, where Bayonetta uses her hair powers to summon a gigantic demon limb to attack through a portal. There are a lot of wicked weave attacks, and the visual representation along with the sound and impact they make on enemies is very enjoyable. There are a handful of weave attacks that range in their input complexity. For a skilled player, you can mix basic combos together into wicked weaves with enough practice. For an inexperienced player, you can just mash out the same attack button, resulting in a powerful weave attack. It's nice having the game teach you its mechanics through its basic gameplay. You start off trying the same attack, giving you this huge payoff. This encourages varied button presses. Like, ooh, what'll happen if I string this other button into my basic mashy combo? Oh my god, I'm rewarded for experimenting with the game mechanics. It's really fun. Where a game like DMC calls you dull or dismal for spamming the same attack over and over, Bayo is a bit more inviting with its gameplay, giving you a huge payoff and then expecting you to try out different things. I've compared Devil May Cry to fighting games in the past with their deep experimental mechanics, and Bayonetta is no different. It's a great, classic Capcom design that's a little easier to get into. One thing Wicked Weaves play into are each of the weapons you'll be finding. Bayonetta gets a plethora of angel-slaying guns, as well as a sword, a whip, and a pair of ice skates, I kid you not. Each and every weapon acts differently depending on which combo you use. A lot of weapon combos have the same inputs, but obviously unique inputs and combos exist per weapon, like the whip's grab attack and the ice skate's ability to freeze enemies solid. My 2 favorite weapons are the devilishly sharp katana, Shuraba, and the snake-like whip, Kolshedra. Shuraba's combos are the most reminiscent of traditional hack-and-slash action games, being basic sword strikes, a stinger, and a charged-up super slash that covers a huge area when fully charged and released. You can maintain Shudaba's charge while dodging using Bayo's unique skill called Dodge Offset that we'll talk about a little later. So yeah, while charging, you can still dodge enemy attacks, making this blade one of the most powerful weapons in the game. I absolutely love it. Kolshedra's ranged attacks can morph into other combos. Like when pulling in an angel, you can follow up with a chopping combo that does a lot of damage and sends enemies flying, which is great for crowd control. Every weapon in this title has its strengths and weaknesses, and while some may seem immediately better than others, with enough practice you can make all of them work effectively in combat. Oh yeah, another thing you can do are the torture attacks. Once your magic gauge fills up, you can perform special button mash attacks where Bayonetta summons up a torture device to decimate her unfortunate foes. The torture attack animations are great, especially the one on the Joy enemies. There are a bunch of these attacks, so performing this action never really gets old. The problem that I have with them is that you really have to be prepared for them because as soon as you hit the input, you'll have to mash the on-screen button super fast. If you don't complete the sequence, you'll only get half the damage. And some of these attacks I can never find myself completing fully, like the one on the doggy angel enemy. Admittedly, this is a small problem. Torture attacks are awesome, and they help to keep the flow of combat interesting by adding flashy links between hits, extending those sick combos. As you tear apart your haloed enemies, you can also dodge in between their attacks. So dodging works with the press of a single button. No DMC, lock on, hold a direction, and then jump to roll out of the way. Just hit R2, baby. Dodging perfectly will activate Bayo's Witch Time ability that slows down time for your enemies. I'm sure I don't have to explain why this is awesome. Witch Time lets you reposition, add way more hits to your combo, and just look overall stylish. It's badass and an incredible feature to have in a game like this. It's kinda like having DMC3's Quicksilver style at all times, but as a skill-based dodge. One advanced tactic that can be used while dodging is something called Dodge Offset. Offset allows you to continue your combos even after dodging, so executing a normal dodge ends your combo string. But if you hold the current button down in your combo and then dodge, you're free to release the button right after and make your next input. If you have Bayo's pistols equipped, Dodge Offset actually has a visual cue that lets you know you've hit the offset properly. It's a pretty cool detail. Seeing the shell casings burst out of the guns was totally satisfying. This skill requires a lot of practice, but once you get it down, you can do some real damage and drop the heaviest combos. It's almost like DMC4's guard flying, but if it was like a conscious thing the developers implemented. Speaking of practice, during every load screen in the game, pressing the start button turns this lifeless void into Bayonetta's own personal training grounds. This almost hidden feature is very important for learning the basics of how combos work outside of missions. The game literally gives you all of Bayo's moves in a convenient list. I wish you had access to all of your weapons in the load screens, but I don't think that would be possible due to this game's dual weapon loadout-like structure. The training room is super valuable to have in a combo-heavy game like this, and honestly, I'm surprised we never saw anything like this in the previously released DMC games. It's an awesome addition that would go on to inspire a lot of other games after Bayo's release. Also later in the game, Bayo can transform into different animals, like a panther that makes her run faster and jump real far, and a swarm of bats which make you dodge better. Seriously, you can take a hit and still dodge the attack while activating Witch Time with these bats. This game is incredible. So that's all of Bayo's built-in combat mechanics. There are optional skills you can unlock, like a stinger move and plenty of other things in the shop, but most interestingly are the secret abilities tied to each of the purchasable accessories. The most notable one, and my favorite, is the Moon of Mahakala, which literally gives you Royal Guard. In this game, it's a lot easier to activate than DMC 3 and 4's almost frame-perfect requirement. Literally, all you have to do is press the movement stick forward into an enemy's attack. The normally timed input gives you a block, but if you hit it perfectly, you counterattack, blasting your foes backward, opening them up for more hits. There are a bunch more of these secret abilities that do a lot of other things, like a doppelganger effect and having the ability to just activate Witch Time when the magic gauge is full. You have a lot to experiment with in this game. It's so much fun mixing and matching certain accessories and weapons in your loadout, and finding the best possible combinations for your playstyle. The types of enemies you'll be facing off against as you progress through Bayonetta's story are quite varied and interesting to fight, as well as look at. They're so shiny. So like any other hack and slash game, the basic angel enemies, the Affinity, start off slow and weak, but as you progress, you'll come across a few different versions of these guys that use a variety of weapons, which you can use, by the way, after defeating these creatures. Aside from the basic enemies, there are multiple unique monsters like Ardor, who is a great sword wielder that is usually found commanding a pack of affinities during gameplay. The ferocious four-legged Fairness and Fearless monsters that are really aggressive and use flame and electric attacks, as well as long-range fireballs. These two color-coded monsters, Grace and Glory, who are both fast and furious and attack you at the same time. Trust me, if these guys catch you off guard, they will legit ruin your day. And there are so many other enemy types, like the plethora of airborne adversaries that you'll be dealing with, as well as other grounded opponents. Every single enemy has its strengths and weaknesses. Every battle in this game requires patience and careful attack placement. Much like later DMC titles, you will be fighting groups of enemies that are mixed together. Flying and grounded beasts will try to halt your advance all at once. Your senses and twitch reflexes have to be sharp if you intend to make it through. This game's challenge escalates perfectly, having basic bitch enemies at the start, allowing you to gain a grasp of the very inviting and easy to use combat system, to having some of the bosses just become normal enemies, like the giant Beloved just showing up regularly. Finally, in the later chapters, you'll be fighting some truly challenging foes like the Joys, who are copies of Bayonetta, with summoned swords of course, and Gracious and Glorious, who are upgraded versions of Grace and Glory that are so fast that you can't use witch time on them. These guys are the ultimate test of your skills. The game's like, oh, you like using that slow-mo to solve all your problems? Well, not anymore, bitch. Let's see what you got. By the way, this is where that Royal Guard accessory comes into play. Don't beat yourself up too much if you get totally wrecked though. This game is difficult by default, and while Bayonetta's mechanics come off as easier to execute than a game like Devil May Cry, Bayo's combat can be very unforgiving at times. Like, at the end of every cutscene introducing a new enemy, that angel will always attack you as the cutscene is ending, so always be on your guard. It's definitely unfair, and I forget about it every time I do my playthroughs where I watch the cutscenes. I really enjoy fighting against most of the enemies in this game. You can tell a lot of time and effort went into designing each angel to make them feel like fully realized combatants. With that said, the kinship enemies can go straight to hell. These things suck. Period. They float around launching their missiles, lasers, and grabby hands most of the time simultaneously. They are the definition of frustration. You really have to be on your toes around these bastards. Okay, that's all I have to say about the normal enemies. They're all incredibly deep and will give you a true challenge during the normal gameplay encounters. The bosses in this game are a mixed bag, however. Most of them are giant monsters that require a specific strat to beat. It's not that they're poorly designed or unpolished, it's just that you'll probably be really confused about what you have to do to defeat them your first time through. Not all of the bosses are like this, but some of them really bring the pace of the game to a screeching halt while you desperately look around trying to figure out what to do. I'll give you an example. Remember the terrible savior boss from DMC4? There are a couple saviors in this game, and it's super unfortunate. Like this boss, where you have to jump around on these platforms, and it's not very clear which direction you have to take to get to the monster's next weak point. By the way, the platforms you jump on break, so you have to keep moving. It feels very cumbersome. There are other boss fights that drop you in, and it's like, wait, how do I hit you? You're all the way over there. Oh, the ground's made of lava. Well, okay then. The good thing here is that once you figure out the optimal path in beating these guys, that's how you do it forever. They're not really random with how they play, just confusing to figure out at first. Of course, like any good action game, there are bosses that are human-sized and are nothing but fun to fight against. All of the battles with Bayonetta's witchy rival, Jeanne, are really good. Each time you fight this babe, she has a new gimmick to keep the battle interesting. It feels a lot like fighting Virgil in DMC3, where in that game, Virgil leveled up with Dante, gaining new attacks. The same goes for Jeanne. It's really cool because Jeanne has the same abilities as you, so countering each other with the same move, like a giant wicked weave, can lead to some stylish quick-time sequences that feel straight out of an anime. It's fantastic. After the end of every mission, you'll be scored just like DMC. The ranks go from the dreaded Stone rank all the way up to the prestigious Pure Platinum. Each fight in a level is its own verse. Some of these are missable, and if you do miss them, it will severely affect your mission rank. By the way, to rack up some good points, make sure to taunt your enemies. This will enrage them, making them more difficult, but that extra difficulty will pay off with a higher combo score, adding another layer to each enemy encounter. Enrage works differently on every enemy. Some won't get angry as easily, needing either a longer taunt or more than one insult to really piss them off. Taunting in this game really enhances Bayonetta's character. When you finally achieve that high-level play, you really feel like this badass angel-slaying goddess of death. It's fucking awesome. This title's level design is very straightforward and linear, like I mentioned before. There aren't any puzzles, but there are well-hidden secret missions that range from easy to, oh my god, what do I have to do to complete this? They're pretty fun, honestly. I love the one where you have to stay in the air for a certain amount of time. I just kept whipping and jump canceling off enemies. It was cool figuring that out for myself. There isn't much filler besides a few mini-boss encounters, and there are special mandatory missions like the one where Bayo has to ride a motorcycle across a collapsing bridge filled with enemies. There's another one-off like this where Bayo is flying through the air on a rocket. And yeah, I don't like these missions as much as the normal hack and slash ones, but there's some fun to be had with these. The rocket one is basically Space Harrier, which Platinum actually got to make their own version of that game's theme song for this particular level. It's a cool little nostalgia callback that makes for some pretty decent gameplay variety. If they were skippable though, I would never play them again. Sorry, Kamiya-san. So that's all of the gameplay we'll be talking about today. Bayonetta is a very fun game with tons of combat depth that requires the very best from you to complete, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Like DMC 3 and 4, there are also years worth of insane skill videos by extremely talented Bayonetta players that you can look up right now and be blown away by. I highly recommend it. So that brings us to the story.
Do you naughty little angels deserve a good spanking?
Beautiful.
Guys, it's pretty insane, but in a good way. So Bayonetta is an ancient Umbran witch who 20 years ago woke up at the bottom of a lake in a casket, with her only remaining memory being that she's a witch. That's right, most of this game is an amnesia tale, retracing your footsteps, rediscovering yourself, that kind of story. There's a ton of information thrown at you in this narrative, from its surprisingly long cutscenes to its characters' backstories and the vast amount of lore to the game's world. I'm not going to cover the full story because that'd be an entirely separate video that I might want to make one day. I'll just say that I think the story and character writing is great. Some of the cutscenes are a drag to get through, only because most of them are slideshows, literally film strip slideshows. It's a very stylized way of presenting a massive story on a budget. This game's plot deals with standard action game tropes and themes like remembrance, discovering one's true self, time travel, and overcoming an impossible threat. As you progress, you'll be meeting a ton of characters like the bumbling informant Enzo.
Speaking of hungry, we done here? My kids are baking me a birthday cake tonight. Cute little fuckers, I tell you what. Well then, adios.
Who, by the way, was picked straight out of the Devil May Cry universe, literally being a character that appeared in the DMC novels and manga. Gates of Hell shopkeeper Rodon is a total badass.
Next time you want your hands on me, you better make sure I'm dead. Now move out the way.
Who supplies Bayo with her weaponry, items, and drinks. Rodon is awesome. As soon as the game starts, we're introduced to Bayonetta's rival, Jeanne. Jeanne is my favorite character, and I absolutely love what they do with her in this game. She comes off as a pursuer-type character in the story, observing Bayonetta's progress as she gets closer and closer to her ultimate goal. Jeanne may come off a certain way at the start, but by the end, there might be some ulterior motives at play. Another character that follows Bayonetta around in a not-so-healthy way is Luca, another bumbling buffoon who starts the game off as comic relief and ends the game, still, pretty much as a dummy.
Do you believe in fate? Fate brought us here together, and it will never tear us apart.
Luca's entire motivation is to catch Bayonetta, the woman who he thinks murdered his father. As the game goes on, Bayonetta treats Luca as nothing more than a plaything, brushing him aside at every turn and goofing on him hardcore. There's a bit of development between these two, but most of the meaningful development comes with Bayo and Jean. Read into that any way you want. It's true, by the way. The last supporting character is a small, mysterious girl who bears a resemblance to our leading lady. This is Little Cereza. Telling her story would be going into spoiler territory, and I actually want you guys to give this game a try, so I won't be talking about her. Like I said, I might make a Bayonetta lore video at some point. Don't hold me to it though. That finally brings us to Bayonetta herself. Guys, I love this character. Bayo is so powerful in every facet of her being. She's so well written too. All of her dialogue hits, and a lot of that is thanks to the incredible voice actress who plays her, Helena Taylor. She gives Bayonetta this very specific Broadway energy, if you know what I mean.
I feel like a fucking celebrity in this town.
That is totally enthralling. Not only does Bayo use demonic weapons to dispatch her foes, but she also uses her sexuality. So one thing I've always liked about this game is that the sexual characteristics of Bayonetta never feel like cheap fan service. Bayonetta acts very sexy through some of her attacks, taunts, and the way she talks to certain characters, but at no point does it ever feel grimy or gratuitous. I know, it's weird to say that about a character that literally strips when murdering each of the bosses. The sex appeal on display just feels like part of Bayonetta's character, part of her personality. I think a lot of it has to do with the feminine influence on the dev team. Bayonetta was designed by a female artist, and her movement was done by highly skilled dancer Maiko Uchida, who, by the way, gave a very memorable and downright amazing performance through her movements in the gameplay and cutscenes. What I'm trying to say is the sexiness in this game is done perfectly, in my opinion. It doesn't feel weird or awkward, it feels very powerful. It's as much a weapon as the pistols we fire at each of Bayo's enemies. And with a powerful lady like Bayonetta comes a very powerful audio and visual presentation. Most of the visual design of Bayonetta's world was done by meme queen herself, Ikumi Nakamura.
Wow, so many people. Wow.
Yup, she is responsible for conceptualizing this title's world and settings, and the accessories and items that you use. A lot of cultural witch lore went into designing all of the accessories, and I love the commitment to making even the smallest aspects of this game fit into the theme of playing as a witch. It's really cool. This game looks excellent. Model and texture work on both the characters and environments are sharp and very visually appealing most of the time. It's just unfortunate that the game seems to be using a very gray gold filter over the screen, muting a lot of the potential color from the environments. With that being said, Nakamura's European-inspired concepts for the world of Bayonetta are awesome. It gives me vibes of what the rest of DMC's world would probably look like. That might just be me, but I always saw the Italian architecture as a somewhat link between the two games, if that makes sense. There's a uniquely feminine quality to this game's visual design that I believe makes it stand out in a really great way. Even though this game uses a very of its time color filter, was one of the more interesting looking games when it released, especially amongst the hordes of military shooters of the early 2010s. This title's cutscenes were done by Yuji Shimomura, who 1 year prior to Bayo's release had also been working on DMC4. It's interesting because Kamiya approached Shimomura about directing the scenario for Bayonetta, but ended up getting turned down at first. Shimomura thought Bayo was too similar in its direction to what he was working on at the time. Eventually, Kamiya convinced Yuji to join in with the direction of the cinematics. So if Bayonetta's gameplay feeling a bit like DMC wasn't enough, its cinematics also have that same over-the-top tone and stylish choreography due to Shimomura's particular style of directing. There's honestly not much to talk about with the creation of the cinematics outside of the fact that they were shot in a similar way to DMC 3 and 4's, using actors for silly previs, then mocapping accordingly. I'm glad that Shimomura ended up doing this game because his direction is very identifiable and always fun to experience. Having played the game countless times, I can't imagine anyone else doing it. For the music, the goal Kamiya had in mind was not to emulate the typical hard rock type music that you'd normally hear in other heavy action games. He wanted the player to know that a hot chick was kicking ass just by listening to the music alone. Giving this direction to the sound team was not only baffling, but left them not knowing what to do at first. Focusing on the concept of femininity and portraying Bayonetta's pure elegance, style, and grace, the team decided to go for a mix of traditional Spanish music, 70s pop, and jazz. The combo ended up working very well, winning over Kamiya on first listen. I personally love the OST for Bayo. I think it works at capturing what a cool and stylish female video game character like Bayonetta would listen to in her free time, as well as the music the player would need to kick ass effectively. It's very fitting and so Bayo. So yeah, the sound guys at Platinum absolutely nailed this part of the game. Although some aspects of the title's visual presentation haven't aged the best, notably the color palette, Bayonetta has a fantastic overall presentation that I feel still holds up over 10 years later. So unique, so memorable, so very witchy. Seriously, this game's version of Fly Me to the Moon is incredible. I hum it all the time to myself. Bayonetta is a game that I don't want you guys to miss out on if you haven't played it yet. This video game is the work of so many talented artists, musicians, programmers, and a man with a very clear vision. There isn't much out there that captures the uniqueness and style of Bayonetta. It's got some problems with pacing in some of its boss fights and these special one-off missions, and the color presentation is lacking a bit in some levels, but overall you're getting a badass action experience out of this game, and a ton of replay value. It's the type of game that absolutely wrecks you your first time through, but incentivizes replays and achieving better mission ranks in order to unlock amazing new costumes, weapons, and characters. It's so much fun feeling the progression of getting better and mastering the game's mechanics. If you're interested in playing Bayonetta, you have a lot of options. You can grab Bayo on PS4, Xbox One, PC, Nintendo Switch, Wii U, 360, and PS3. If for whatever reason you only have access to a PS3, I'd recommend staying away from this version of the game due to a huge amount of frame rate and loading time issues. That version of the game is super cursed, I don't know why. I got the Bayo Vanquish collection recently on PS4. 2 incredible games in a really nice case at the perfect price. I highly recommend it. If you've been following along with my DMC retrospective series, and you've been enjoying those games so far, please check out Bayonetta. This title kinda feels like a sequel to DMC 1 in a lot of ways. Kamiya's signature design style is all over Bayonetta. I think you guys will like it a lot. It's awesome looking back on Bayonetta and seeing just how many people who were involved with its creation who are still working on badass titles to this day. The strong female influence on the dev team shows in the best possible way. Bayonetta's quality not only makes for an amazing video game, but something that is truly one of a kind.
Don't fuck with a witch.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. I started this video like 4 months ago and finally got around to finishing it. A lot of things came up while making this thing that kept pushing my workflow back, and it really sucked. Anyhow, I just want to give a huge shout out to today's guest artist, Liz Art, who painted this incredible piece of art of my avatar dressed as Bayonetta. It looks fantastic, Lisa. Thank you so much for helping me with this video. If you guys liked this video, please consider subscribing and checking out my Patreon link down below. Okay everyone, I hope you had fun watching today and have a great day. I'll talk to you all soon. Later.